Energy media has done a lot of reporting on EV adoption, electric vehicle sales, essentially. And one of the tools that we use to analyze that is the adoption S-curve. So at the tail of the curve, you have slow adoption, and then you hit the inflection point where you sort of zoom up the hockey stick, if you want to think of the shaft of the hockey stick. And that's that point where that happens is the inflection. Everybody wants to know, where is the inflection point? And I'm curious about where it might be in the coming years. And so we're going to talk to Jeff Turner from Dunsky Energy Consulting in Montreal. Welcome to the interview, Jeff.
Great, thanks for having me, Markham.
Now, my take on this is the inflection point is really, really close, maybe mid-decade at the outside, particularly in the wealthier countries. What's your take on it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think this idea of an S-curve, we've seen this time and time again for different technologies. And it's something that, I feel like I've been watching EV sales numbers almost like my favorite sports team for the past 10 years or so. And it's been really fun and exciting to watch things really grow and pick up pace. But trying to get a sense of where things are going in the future is a big part of the work that we've been doing. We've done a lot of modeling of EV adoption across Canada and some of the States as well. And I think, it's a convergence of a number of factors. And so I think one part of it is just the natural technology diffusion from innovators to those imitators who are eager to see this technology on the road. And so from that perspective, we are at a point now where your average Canadian is, if they live in a fairly densely populated environment, they are probably seeing EVs on a daily basis, whether they know it or not. And that is part of the equation. But there's also a number of other factors involved. And, whereas I'm an EV early adopter, I'm a true believer, and I know about the benefits of EVs and how exciting it is to wake up to a full charge in my driveway. Most mainstream consumers still have a lot of preoccupations, a lot of barriers to adoption. And when we forecast EV adoption, we really try to take account of those barriers and really try to quantify to what extent we're addressing those over time. And I think that there is still a lot of work to do on a number of those fronts.
So if we have forces that are slowing down adoption and forces that are speeding up adoption, and I assume that your model takes into account, the relevant ones, after all of that sifts out, what's your, because I noticed, you neatly avoided assigning a date or guessing at a date for when the inflection point will arrive. So I'm going to pin you down now. What does your model say about when we're likely to achieve that?
Yeah, well, I think, maybe what's easier for me is to give some firmer numbers. So what do we mean by an inflection point? I think often we talk about things in terms of percent market share of new sales. And so some helpful benchmarks, for example, Canada has some federal targets that they've established, hitting 30% of new vehicle sales by 2030, 100% by 2040. And where we are on the S-curve really depends on where you are in the country. We've done some modeling recently for the Quebec government that has found that Quebec is really likely to surpass that target. Even in some more pessimistic scenarios, 30% is really easily achievable. And part of that is because, we are already crossing that inflection point very soon in Quebec. And one of the key ingredients, of course, is the price parity with gas cars. And so just as one example, in the modeling that we've done, we predict a price parity for your average EV. So say something that has about 400 kilometers of range happening in the later half of this decade. And along with that comes, a really serious uptick in demand for those vehicles. In other parts of the country, though, we've also done some recent modeling in Nova Scotia. They're much further behind, and they're much earlier on that S-curve. So there's a lot of more work to be done there, and it's gonna come later than that. That said, the provincial government in Nova Scotia just launched some new incentives, so that's certainly going to help push things along that S-curve much faster.
I've had the opportunity to interview James Frith, who's the head of energy storage for Bloomberg New Energy Finance. And these are the folks who do the seminal work, I think, on battery prices. And he's expecting that we will reach $100 a kilowatt hour for battery packs by 2023, maybe 2024 at the outside. And that is the threshold for price parity, sticker price parity between EVs and gas cars. And as you say, that's got to be the thing that pushes us pretty close to the inflection point.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, that said, there are all those other barriers to adoption, because people are still going to ask, well, what happens when I go on a road trip? And you can talk to them until you're blue in the face about how 95% of the time you're charging at home, and that's really convenient. If anything, it's more convenient than having to swing by a gas station once or twice a week. But people do still make their vehicle purchases thinking of those once in a while trips and use cases. So the price coming down, that's a very important factor. But people also really want to make sure that when they switch to an EV, it's going to be a convenient change in their use of vehicles. So I think another important trend to keep an eye on is deployment of charging infrastructure and improvements in charging capabilities. So I think we've recently seen announcement of models that can get an 80% charge in under 20 minutes. And we see that's baked into our model. We've been sort of watching that trend for a number of years. And we think that's also another really important development towards supporting those mainstream purchasers switching over to an EV.
Just one final point on the factors that are accelerating. And I think the last year, the flurry of announcements from automakers about the billions of dollars that they're investing in switching over to entirely EV manufacturing has really changed people's opinions. I think that it's had a big impact on public opinion, because now consumers see that the automakers are buying in, and so if the people who's are putting the money up for this are bought in, then the chances are this is viable technology.
Yeah, and I think the messaging is really important, but also just the real outcomes of those decisions are important. And I think one very big barrier to adoption that we've seen over the past 10 years is the limited diversity of the models that were available on the market. Up till now, if you wanted an EV, for the most part, you were very likely to all you really had to choose from were relatively small cars. And I'd say just this year, right now, we're seeing a real surge in the availability of, for example, mid-size crossovers, which is the most popular vehicle segment in North America. So now there's an explosion of the number of options that are available, both plug-in hybrids and pure electric vehicles. And I think with that, you're going to see a big surge in interest from folks where that type of vehicle is more likely to fit their lifestyle. Not to mention the plug-in pickup trucks that seem to get even more of the headlines. It's a popular segment, not quite as popular as the SUVs, but there are some real big hitters there. The most popular single vehicles on the market are pickup trucks. So the fact that just about every pickup truck manufacturer has got something coming down the pipeline in the next year or two, that's also going to be a really important enabler for penetration of EVs across the whole light duty vehicle segment.
Well, just to wrap up, Jeff, the fact that you and I kind of agree on more or less when the inflection point is coming and when sales are really going to start to rocket up, we're really talking 3 to 5 years. I mean, this is in an automaker's life, from an automaker's point of view, from policy point of view, that's very rapid. It's like being around the corner.
Yeah, no, it takes I used to actually work for a vehicle manufacturer, and I saw what goes into actually developing a vehicle and making sure it's designed and to be reliable and it's going to meet the needs of their customers. It takes a number of years of development and testing and validation. So yeah, like you said, a 5-year timeline is basically a little over a product development cycle. So I think it's automakers, we're starting to see them respond more aggressively to this trend. And I'm encouraged to see that they're getting into the space with a little bit more enthusiasm than we've seen over the past 10 years. But I'm excited to really see the fruits of their labor hit the market and be there available on showroom floors for people to go and test drive and take home if they like what they see.
Jeff, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate your insights.
Yeah, I really appreciate the conversation. It was fun.